Story we brought you last month. The Army has filed criminal charges against a gynecologist who has been accused of secretly filming patients. Dr. Blaine McGraw has been charged with indecent visual recording and conduct unbecoming an officer, among others. They stem from his work at the Fort Hood Army base in Texas. Officials say there are a total of 44 victims. He's currently being held in a county jail in Texas. President Trump is doubling down on threats to expand U.S. military operations against drug trafficking targets. In a wide-ranging interview with Politico, Mr. Trump said he was open to actions in Colombia and Mexico, and he declined repeatedly to rule out a ground invasion in Venezuela. It comes as administration officials briefed top lawmakers today on the military's nearly 24 strikes against alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. Democratic lawmakers are pushing Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to release unedited video of a September strike in which 2 survivors were killed as they clung to the wreckage of their boat.
His answer, we have to study it. Well, in my view, they've studied it long enough. Congress ought to be able to see it. I told him that every member of Congress, so many members of Congress, Democrat and Republican, had a right to see it, wanted to see it, and should see it.
Also today, Navy Admiral Alvin Halsey, who will retire from command of the campaign to destroy alleged drug boats, held a separate classified video call with lawmakers. Honduras is seeking the arrest of the country's former president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was pardoned by President Trump and released from a U.S. prison last week. The Attorney General of Honduras is asking authorities there and Interpol to execute a 2023 arrest warrant for Hernandez over fraud and money laundering charges. He was sentenced last year to 45 years in prison for helping move tons of cocaine to the U.S. Mr. Trump announced his plan to pardon Hernandez just days before national elections in Honduras, claiming that he had been treated unfairly by prosecutors. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's ready to hold elections within 90 days, but only if Ukraine's U.S. and European partners can help ensure security for such a vote. Zelensky has been criticized for staying in his role after his term ended last year. Just today, President Trump said in a Politico interview that without elections in Ukraine, it gets to a point where it's not a democracy anymore. Zelensky has said it's unsafe to hold a vote during wartime. He's pointed to Ukraine's constitution, which bars elections while martial law is in effect. But today he offered to work with that country's parliament to change the law to allow a vote. Australia has officially ruled out the world's first social media ban for those under the age of 16. It's up to the companies to decide how they enforce the ban. 10 platforms, including Instagram and TikTok, face fines of up to $30 million if they fail to comply. One high schooler who was part of a lawsuit challenging the ban says it's unfairly cut off his access to the broader world.
As young Australians, we will be completely silenced and cut off from our country and the rest of the world with this ban. We've just grown up with this our entire lives, and now it's just being taken away from us all of a sudden.
The rollout is being watched closely by other countries which are considering similar measures amid global concerns over the impact of social media on children's health and safety. On Wall Street today, stocks ended mixed ahead of tomorrow's decision by the Fed on interest rates. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gave back about 180 points on the day. The Nasdaq managed a modest gain of about 30 points. The S&P 500 slipped just 6 points, so roughly flat. And Raul Malo, lead singer of the Mavericks, has died.
There goes my heart,
He helped write some of the band's most popular songs, including There Goes My Heart from 1994. He co-founded the Grammy Award-winning group back in 1989 using alt-country, Americana, and Latin sounds. Malo brought his expansive, soulful voice to more than a dozen albums in both English and Spanish. Last year, he announced that he had staged cancer. Parents and students are deciding which college to choose in the ever-changing higher education landscape. A man wrongfully detained by ICE discusses his arrest and treatment in an immigration facility. And our list of the best books of 2025.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Georgia Representative Marjorie Marjorie Taylor Greene rose to national prominence as one of the most vocal backers of President Donald Trump. But the pair fell out dramatically and publicly after she called for the extension of expiring health care subsidies and fought for the release of the Epstein files over his objections. She prevailed in the latter fight, but has announced that she'll be resigning in early January. Marjorie Taylor Greene joins us now from her office on Capitol Hill. Congresswoman, welcome to the NewsHour. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Can we just begin with some of the news today, which, as you know, is President Trump kicking off what the White House says is going to be a series of events talking about affordability. I know you broke with the president's side of the Democrats on this issue, specifically as it relates to health care costs during the shutdown. But I have to ask you, you've seen the polling, you've seen how Americans are looking at this. Do you think the president has lost the Americans' trust on this core issue of affordability?
Well, this is an issue actually I've been talking about for months and months. Americans truly suffered under the past 4 years where we saw inflation skyrocket to 40-year highs in 2022. And while inflation has steadied, prices have not really come down except in a few key areas. But unfortunately, over the past year, we've seen the president, the White House as a whole, focus tremendously on foreign policy. My stance, of course, and many others, is no more foreign wars. That means that we don't have to participate or fund them. But we haven't seen a strong focus on America's economy and affordability, just as you mentioned, just until recently. Now, I'm happy to see that turn and that focus put there, but I think, unfortunately, that should have been the focus the entire time.
We've seen President Trump also previously dismiss concerns about affordability as a Democratic hoax. Do you think that was a mistake?
Yes, I do. Affordability, or the lack of ability of Americans to afford the cost of living, is not a Democrat hoax. Credit card debt is at an all-time high right now. And there's many other problems in the economy. It just hasn't quite stabilized yet.
You've also broken with President Trump when it comes to backing an effort to release the full Epstein files. And I know we've said in the past, too, the survivors have come to you and offered to provide you a list of the perpetrators they've compiled so that you can read it on the House floor. You've only got a few days left in Congress, so are you going to do that before you leave?
Well, just to be clear, they have not given me that list of names. So that's a list that they still hold. And I can tell you firsthand, I can understand the fear that these women have to release that list of names. And they are the only ones that can choose to do so. So if they were to give me that list of names, I certainly would be willing to do it before I left.
When you came out to back the release of those files, you said that President Trump told you that people will get hurt if those files are released. I have to ask, what did you take that to mean? Was the president talking about himself?
I really don't know what that means, and I can't comprehend it. So just going by what the women themselves have told me, and I've met with them several times, is they said that Donald Trump had done nothing wrong. Their attorney said that he was the only one that helped them years ago with Jeffrey Epstein and lawsuits and convictions. So it's, again, based on their words, it doesn't sound like Donald Trump is guilty of harming them in any way.
So if I may, if that's the case, well, who do you think the president is worried about here?
Well, if he says people will get hurt, I don't think it's the women. I think it's maybe the men that they're talking about, that they're scared to say who they are. Maybe those names are in the files, and we don't know because all the files have not come out yet.
Now, Congresswoman, I have to ask you, as you pointed out, you were a staunch, vocal MAGA loyalist for the president, voting with him 98% of the time, and it went very quickly to you breaking with him publicly and deciding to leave Congress within just a matter of months. And earlier this year, you were calling him my favorite president of all time. Meanwhile, he's called you a lunatic, a traitor. After your recent 60 Minutes interview, he said your views are, quote, those of a very dumb person. Is he still your favorite president of all time?
Well, I think the president's words are unfortunate, but this is the behavior that unfortunately America is used to seeing from Donald Trump. And that when I've talked a lot about how politics have become so toxic and it's violent. You know, my office has reported 773 death threats since I've been in Congress, and that's not all of them. There were many more. And after the president unfortunately called me a traitor, even though I have been his most loyal member of Congress, and have such a strong voting record with him, I also have legislation that directly reflects many of his executive orders. The result of that was a pipe bomb threat on my house, a pipe bomb threat on my construction company, multiple pizza doxing deliveries, and a direct death threat, multiple direct death threats on my own son. And this is the type of the nature of toxic politics that I think America is so tired of. But it really shows there's a problem in the Republican Party when the leader of the Republican Party, the President of the United States, would actually attack one of his own members that has